Hi, I'm John from Japanese Knife Imports, and today we're going to go over the basics of single bevel sharpening. I know that I have some other videos on YouTube that discuss the same subject, and this video is more intended to cover the concepts and what it is that you're trying to do in your sharpening so that you can achieve results. So it can be used in conjunction with the videos where we actually show the technique and do the demonstrations. So I have a knife here that I will be using as my example, and it's a Geishin Kide 270mm blue number 1 Yanagiba. And hopefully through the course of this video, you'll have an understanding of what it is that you're trying to achieve in sharpening single bevel knives and how to go about that. I have some images here to assist in that process. And so my first image here shows the different shapes and profiles of three very common single bevel knives. This top one here is Yanagiba, this is Deba, and this is Kamagata Usuba. Yanagiba is a fish slicing knife used for slicing boneless fillets of fish, as in sushi and sashimi. Deba is a fish filleting knife used for breaking down fish. And Kamagata Usuba is a vegetable knife used for techniques like katsuramuki and ken cuts, as in tate ken and yoko ken and so on and so forth. You'll notice here that the edge is always parallel to the shinogi line, which is this blue line here. And we'll go over that in a little bit more detail, but for now it's just something to keep in mind as a basic idea of what it is that you're trying to do. So the first thing I want to do is go over the construction of single bevel knives with you. And so here we have an image that shows a cross section of single bevel knives. This in particular shows a waseboshi, or a clad knife, where it has softer cladding and harder steel as the cutting edge. If this were a konyaki knife, or a single piece of hardened steel, the entire knife would be hard steel. You can see here that this part over here is softer cladding, and this part over here would be the harder steel, which becomes your cutting edge. On the back side of the knife, or the ura, you have a hollow ground part here called the urasuki, and it's flattened along the bottom and top of the blades. And so if you're looking at the knife and you look at the back side of the knife, right, this is the back side of the knife, you'll see a flat spot all the way around the top part here and towards the tip and along the bottom. And when you look at it this way, you can see that it's a little bit hollow ground there. Alright, so that is the ura of the knife. This front part up here, the table of the knife, usually has the engraving and a nice even scratch pattern. And this part over here, where the bevel of the knife begins, is called the shinogi line. And so when you look at these knives and you see the shinogi line is this ridge at the top of the bevel. And again, you can see that it runs consistently even with the edge of the knife. The bevels on these knives are actually compound bevels. It's not just one straight bevel from the shinogi line down to the edge. It's a couple of different parts. And the style of sharpening, where it's a couple of different parts blended together, is called a hamaguri edge. So when sharpening these knives, you start sharpening from the shinogi line down to about the lamination line. That's one bevel. Then you lift up just a little bit and you sharpen from that lamination line, which is about halfway or 3/4 of the way down the blade, down to the edge. In this second part of sharpening, this is where you form a burr. Then you do uraoshi sharpening, and you may use a micro bevel later on, depending on what it is that you're looking for. And these two bevels are generally blended together. So you can see the green part here is that first bevel, the red part is that second bevel, and this little black thing here at the bottom would be your micro bevel. So again, to go over the order of stuff that you'll be doing in sharpening, I have this little image here. In your first sharpening, you're going to sharpen from the shinogi line down to the lamination line, or about halfway. Your pressure is going to be down against the stone and back against the shinogi line, because what you're trying to do is move the shinogi line up. The thing is that you want the shinogi line to be even and consistent. You don't want a wavy shinogi line. You want it to be nice and straight and, again, parallel to the edge. And you're trying to move it up at the same rate that your edge moves up. So if you're taking out nicks and chips from the edge of your knife, and you're taking off a millimeter of the edge, you want the shinogi line to move up a millimeter. And so in this first sharpening, you're doing that by having your pressure down and back up against the shinogi line, and sharpening in your mind from the shinogi line down, and again, halfway or so, to about the lamination line. In your second sharpening, you're going to sharpen from the area that you just stopped your sharpening at, about that lamination line, down to the edge. This is the sharpening where you actually form a burr, and you'll be able to feel, and you want to make sure, just in the same as double bevel knives, that your burr is even and consistent from heel to tip, to make sure that you're removing the same amount of metal across the length of the blade. If your burr is big in one area, let's say you have a huge burr here at the heel and not so much here at the tip, you're going to be removing more steel towards the heel, and the shape of your knife will change over time. So, once you've done that, you'll have a burr on your knife. You're going to go and do uraoshi sharpening, which is the back sharpening of the knife. Uraoshi is a very specific kind of sharpening where you lay the back of the knife, the hollow ground side, flat on your stone, and you use a finishing stone, a higher grit stone, and you have your pressure only on the push and not on the pull. The reason that it's only on the push is that as you're pulling back, you have a tendency to rotate your knife back towards the stone anyways. So the back top part of the flat spot here will grow wider at a faster rate than the front part. So by putting pressure when you push, you even that out a little bit, and you can maintain the same width here and here. So the same width of the flat spot along the spine as it is along the edge. Doing uraoshi sharpening is an important part of your sharpening. Not only does it remove your burr, but it also strengthens your edge. You just have to be careful because you have limited real estate here to deal with. If you overdo uraoshi sharpening, you'll end up flattening out the hollow ground part of your knife too quickly. And the hollow ground part is important. The construction of these knives allows you to control where pressure is going to be in your sharpening. So you know that on the hollow ground side, no pressure is being exerted against your food, and on the bevel side, pressure is being exerted against your food. So when you're doing slicing, like usuzukuri, the slice part is up here against the hollow ground side, and it doesn't have pressure against it, and it allows you to do exceedingly thin slices without causing damage to your food. And when you're doing hirazukuri and slicing over, you're using the bevel to push the food away from what you're cutting and stack it nicely. So you're not causing damage to any part that you're doing stuff, but you control where pressure is in your cutting. Flattening that part out so much will change the way that that part of the knife interacts with your food. So you want to be careful. If the ura is not ground enough, your edge will be kind of weak and frail. So there's a balance that you're looking for with regard to sharpening, and for each person, of course, it will be different. But in general, you're expecting about 1 to 2 millimeters width of a flat spot in that area. Some will be a little bit more, some will be a little bit less, and it will change over time. So you've done your uraoshi sharpening. At this point, then, what you want to do is blend the two bevels together here. So you're going to blend them together so you have a nice kind of light convexing of your edge, and that's your hamaguri edge. And at this point, you also may put on your koba or micro bevel. And this is used and can be used on all knives, but specifically people use it on very hard steels, very brittle steels, and also for knives that are going to go through abuse or where the edge is exceedingly thin. So you see micro bevels a lot on deba, and you see them a lot on professional yanagiba and kamagata usuba because the professionals need the edge to last through their shift and go through the kind of rigors that it goes through in professional environment. Some people choose not to use koba, and that's okay, but you just have to understand what's appropriate for the knife and also appropriate for your personal cutting style and technique and the task at hand. If you're cutting particularly tough things, you probably want to adjust your sharpening accordingly. Once you do the blending and the koba, you'll probably want to do uraoshi sharpening again to make sure that you have a clean edge and no residual burr. And a lot of sharpeners use a lateral stroke, so on uraoshi sharpening as a final stroke, pulling the knife horizontally across the stone with light pressure to help kind of remove the burr a little bit more. When your sharpening is done, you want to test your edge. And a couple of ways that people test the edge in Japan is they use their thumb. And what they'll do is they'll take the knife and they'll put the edge against their thumb. And they'll pull lightly as if they're going to try and slice through their thumbnail. Please don't slice through your thumbnail and try not to cut super hard through it, but you can leave the weight of the knife on your thumbnail and pull a little bit. And if you've done a good job sharpening and you have a nice toothy edge, your edge will stick in your thumbnail as you move. And so you'll see, it sticks, and it sticks, and it sticks. And at each point along the blade, it will stick. And this tells you that you have a nice sharp edge and that it has a good amount of bite to it. And the bite will vary. Obviously, coarser things will have more bite and finer things will have less bite. And if you go too far in refinement of your edge, you'll find that there's no bite and the knife skids along your nail. The same thing will happen if you round over the micro bevel too much, or if you round your edge really a lot, it won't stick. Or if your edge isn't sharp, it won't stick. Another thing that you want to look is how thin or how delicate is the edge going to be. And so what you can do is you can take the edge and flex it down along your nail and roll your thumb underneath the edge. And you can see the metal flex against your thumbnail. And depending on what the knife is, that amount of flex will vary. But if you see a wildly huge amount of flex in a knife that's going to go through some abuse, like in a Bevel, for example, you probably have a wire edge. Your edge is ground too thin, and so you want to do something about that. Whether, again, it's using a micro bevel or adjusting the angles at which you sharpen. In Kamagata Usuba, it's a very thin knife. Usuba is meaning, of course, thin blade. It's a very thin knife, and so you'll see more flex in that naturally. But again, if you see an excessive amount of flex, and you'll know what excessive is based on your experience with knives, so it will take some time to get used to. You'll know that your edge is too thin, or you have a wire edge, or something else is going on where you need to adjust your sharpening to make sure that your edge will hold up. So those are two ways that you can test before cutting food, but of course the best test that you can do for your knives is use them. Use them to cut food and see how they work. See how the edge holds up. See if parts of the edge are folding over. And then when you go back, you can adjust your sharpening accordingly to make sure that you can fix mistakes that you made, or adjust your edge to suit your task at hand a little bit better, or so on and so forth. So, after that, I have one last image here that I want to show you. In here you can see a couple of images. This top one shows a Yanagiba with the black line here at the bottom being the original edge and the red line above it being the new edge. And here the black line being the original shinogi line and the red line above being the new shinogi line. And you can see here that they move up at the same rate. And that's a very important thing. If you imagine this is the back side of the knife and here's my edge, and this part here, would have the bevel, this is my shinogi line. If they move at the same rate as you go up the knife, you continually thin your knife as you go, and that maintains the geometry of your Yanagiba over time. If the shinogi line isn't moving, but the edge is moving up, over time it's going to be a less acute angle, and your knife isn't going to perform the same way. And so you really need to make sure that they're moving at a consistent rate, or if you make an adjustment, make one because you understand what you're doing and because you know what you're looking for from your knife. So that's what this top image here shows. In this bottom image, it just kind of shows how the knife shrinks over time, and again, that whole geometry thing. And so you can see what happens to the knife over time as you sharpen it, how the hollow ground part will become less and less space for you to use, so you don't want to overzealously sharpen that area, and how moving the shinogi line up at the same rate will help you maintain that geometry over time. In the same way that I show in double bevel knives, I've also colored in the area here along the tip of the knife, because as you sharpen the tip, you want to make sure that you have the area that you need in contact with the stone. So when you're sharpening this first part from the shinogi line down to about halfway, the part that's going to be in contact with your stone is going to be here from the shinogi line up to about the lamination line. And when you're sharpening the edge, of course, it's going to be from that lamination line all the way to the tip of the knife. And so as you make your adjustment for the tip, you want to make sure that you're adjusting all the way up to those areas so that you can maintain the curve of your knife over time. There is a very important reason that the knives are curved this way, and whether it's because in Deba they're designed to fit in specific curves, or in Yanagiba it's designed to make sure that you can use appropriate technique as you're slicing through things and lifting up, it's something important to maintain. So try not to flatten out these areas or make kind of wavy bevels. As I showed in this first image, and you can use this as a reference, this is the shapes of the knives. These are the way that they look. And so use this and make sure that your knife is looking something like this as you sharpen. As always, if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. You can email us at john@JapaneseKnifeImports.com or look us up on our website at Japanese Knife Imports. Thank you so much, and I hope this has been helpful for you.